Okay, I'm so professional. So today is June 24th, 2020, and we're discussing "Look for the Light" by Regyna Cooper. Yay! I got a thumbs up. I really did read it. I really did, style it on my blog. I just have a hard time.
That's for you, Jory.
Okay, so good. So are we in gallery mode? I now know I'm recording. Are we in, do you see all the faces? No. There, now oh man, we got it. Oh God, this is exhausting. All right. So God bless you, everybody. Thank you for listening to us. And let's start with introductions and going alphabetically. I believe that would be Brett first. I'll go by first name anyway. No, it's
I'm Brett. I've traveled all over the world, a lot of time in the Middle East. I did spend time in Japan and Far Asia, but a lot of that was on a ship, so I didn't experience that culture quite as much. And just did a lot of traveling for about 10 years and just experienced a lot of very different perspectives. And even though I'm back now in the States, a quote I heard recently is, "Coming back to the same place is not the same as never leaving." So definitely left me with a lot of different perspectives and a lot of different questions. And I think that's mainly why I end up in this group.
Yes.
I have an innate talent of challenging the status quo, and I don't even mean to.
We love your questions, Brett. So I do have to say that I was really excited when we found out that Brett would be coming home from Bahrain. She'd been overseas for 5 years. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. We'll be able to see so much more of her. And actually right now, so far, it's about the same, once a year. Have not seen Brett's home out in Portland. I haven't met in person. Do you say in person? I haven't met her little puppy. And look forward to seeing you again one of these days, Brett, when this pandemic lifts. But thank you for being part of this group. I at least get to visit with you by way of Zoom Live. And thank you that you arrange your schedule from work so that you can be here. All right, Brett. Byron, good to have you back.
Thank you. Good to be back. My name is Byron Broad. I am one of the pastors at Bel Air United Methodist Church in Bel Air, Maryland. We are a suburb of Baltimore, Maryland. I am one of Jory's pastors. And in the same way that, all of Christianity would be very diverse, we're very diverse here at Bel Air United Methodist Church in our opinions, our thoughts, our politics, our theologies. But we come together under the banner of we will agree to disagree in love, and we strive to love as Jesus loves. I'm glad to be a part of these discussions.
Thank you, Byron. James, you want to go next?
I'm going to defer to Regyna.
Okay.
I'm Regyna Cooper. James and I have a business and ministry, and we live in Towson, Maryland. Our business is that of helping people. Our business and ministry is about helping people be restored to what God is calling to be, so they can walk fully in that, in faith and trusting that God has them along that journey. What else? Today would be Mr. Cooper's birthday.
Hey! Happy birthday.
Yeah.
45.
Ooh, I take it.
Staying healthy.
Is that why you went to the doctor for a physical today? Because it was your birthday?
No, it's just
present. Yeah.
All right. So James, will you go now?
Yes. And so we always leave a couple of things out. So along with what Regyna said, we're also authors, speakers, and we are proud parents of a grown man with his voice as deep as mine now, which is beautiful to see and also amazing at the same time. So
who is also an author.
That's right. Who is also an author. Yeah. I was almost going to grab his book over there, but I'd have to reach out of frame. But so we are happy to be here and to be a part of these discussions. And For us, it's another opportunity to come together and see what God's going to do with all of us as we go forward.
Good. Thank you, James. I'm Jory Fisher. I think some of you may know that already since this is on my Facebook Live. And for work / fun, because I think work should be fun or why do it, right? I actually enjoy helping entrepreneurial women of faith grow thriving businesses and live meaningful lives. I've studied purpose and calling and business for years now, and I have a law background, but I switched to coaching and training kind of gradually at first, and then when we moved from Virginia to Maryland, abruptly, because I didn't want to take the bar exam again. So now I do not practice law. I am 100% a coach and trainer, and still trying to get used to empty nest, even though our children are all grown, witness Brett Beeson. And Dave and I, between us, have really 8 kids. It's funny to say kids, but Dave has 3 girls and a boy, and I have the lovely 3 daughters. Many of you know Jana. Jana and Brett are twins, and their older sister Rebecca is not on Facebook, so you don't see her as much. And then also their father and I had adopted a wonderful young man named Shane Phillips, who lives in Colorado, and he now has a beautiful family of his own. So people don't hear about him very much either. People just hear about Brett and Jana because they're on Facebook. Okay, I will stop. Look at Brett's expression. I will stop now and hand the microphone to Regyna, figuratively speaking. And who knows where this well, God knows where this conversation will go. But the purpose for us getting together is because for each of us, God is very important to us. And we didn't know when we first started these conversations, they've been weekly up till this point. We didn't know that we had a feeling COVID was upon us and was going to get worse, but we certainly didn't know about anything else that's going on in the country and in the world now. I mean, how could we? And so while in the beginning, our discussions mostly centered around how we were being affected by the epidemic turned pandemic, now what we've been talking about the past few weeks have been more along the lines of racial injustice and racial sensitivity and racial understanding. And so I asked Regyna if she would have the honor, please, of writing the post for this week. So go for it, Regyna.
Thank you so much, Ms. Jory. And I will thank Brett for asking the question that was posed today and challenged me because I was looking for where we were going and how we were having these conversations and continue to have these conversations to grow our perspectives, to grow our understanding of one another, and that people can join in that journey that we're going on in discovery. I think the whole country is going through this journey of understanding and change. That's the simplest way to put it. So one of the questions that was posed was, darkness cannot drive out darkness. And that was a quote by Dr. Martin Luther King. So when we're looking at all the things that are going on today and as we move forward, I think a lot of people are wondering, why are we in this place of chaos? And it seems like we just keep seeing darkness. I think that's where a lot of the frustration and fears that we hear and people being polarized is because of that place of fear. So I wanted to talk about, the first thing I want to discuss is change. And where do we see in our communities? I'm looking for the light, like looking at those things that we see changing for the positive in our communities and our spheres of influence. I think that's the best way to start the conversation. And we'll, as Joy says, we'll move and it'll organically happen the way it's supposed to happen. So, Byron, I think I'll start with you with some of the things that you've seen positive that's been going on in the midst of the pandemic, the racial unrest, the whole body of everything that's going on right now.
Thank you, Regyna. Excellent blog, by the way. I really appreciate that. And I really appreciate that we are and have been coming together for these discussions. In terms of positives that I've seen with COVID, that's something that, I'll come back around to that was part of our discussion at the beginning, giving people an opportunity to find rest, giving the earth an opportunity to find renewal, giving us an opportunity to recenter ourselves and ground ourselves and what's most important, what's most valuable. So seeing people come together, work together, seeing people lifted up in our community who are hometown heroes, all of those are wonderful positives. Are there positives from the racial injustice that are going on? Maybe that's a harder question to answer because it's a much more difficult and volatile situation. On the one hand, with COVID, it focused us all in a sense that we're all in this together and that we're all surviving this together. With the racial injustice, we find that we go back to maybe our different political camps sometimes, and there are people arguing and fighting. So is there a positive in the midst of that? I do think that there is, and I think finding that positive is good to emphasize that. Maybe what I would say is a positive is I think more people are listening. I think more white people are listening than ever have before. I think some white people are saying, oh my goodness, I get it, I see it, I understand. I've had some of my white friends on social media say, I don't think that I was fully on board, I didn't understand. But now when I see the videos or these string of videos put together, I'm starting to understand in just a very small way. So that sympathizing and empathizing is a huge step. I think there's greater understanding in general toward what Black Lives Matter means and what it's all about. And I think that a lot of people are able to hear love and guarding and protection behind our sisters and brothers who are persons of color, more so now than I have ever seen before.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely agree with that. And you said something about COVID and then the racial injustice. Was interesting because when you were saying that, it's like we were on a single truth when we were looking at COVID. We all, it is there, whether you thought it was as bad as it was or not, it was there and it was tangible, actually. It's not like it's, well, what's your perspective of it? It is what it is. And then understanding how to move forward into the place of us understanding and being on the same place and the racial equality in the country and around the world, as we've been saying, is how do we get on the same page? And I think that's been the interesting piece of that.
That's exactly right, Regyna. I agree with that completely. And one of the things that I've been sharing with my congregation is what's most difficult with facing racial injustice in the world is we lack a common creed. And I don't mean just here at Bel Air United Methodist Church. I mean in our culture. In our culture, when we're facing racial injustice, we lack a common creed. And to be able to find that common creed is essential, I think, for bringing us all together.
Yeah, that's powerful. I think that should be a slogan, the common creed. It seems like it should be so simple. Go ahead, Jory.
That's nice. I like that.
I mean, I was just going to say it's kind of interesting. And, to both of y'all's points, I think one of the things I've heard recently is the good that's come out of this month is that, finally people are having these conversations in the open. It's no longer whispered behind closed doors like, hey, that's kind of racist. And I've had those conversations, like looking at brochures for the recruiting job that I'm currently doing. I'm like, there's a lot of white people on these brochures. But, it wasn't a big deal. It was just like, well, I guess that's kind of how it is. So, and that would be the positive. But lacking a common creed is an interesting thing to dig into. And especially if you do start touching on the Confederacy, right? And because I was talking a lot about it, because I currently live in the Pacific Northwest. And I've heard a lot of times people be like, you know, we should take care and consideration to everyone's viewpoints, but those Confederate statues, you should tear them down. And I'm like, you know, growing up in Virginia, it's not like I die hard by Old Glory, but I'm like, let's
You live in a
pause.
city where Thomas Jefferson was taken down, and you come
I
from
didn't.
Virginia.
We're from Virginia, and it's just interesting for me because lacking a common creed, not only is it lacking a common experience, but in theory, the Declaration of Independence gave us all a common creed, and it's just been so unevenly applied. And that was kind of what I was getting at when I was talking with people about the Confederate flag. And I'm like, okay, you know, you can compare the Confederate flag to the Nazi swastika. I'm not going to say you're wrong. It is a flag that is steeped in deeply racial and deeply troubled history. And, you know, it belongs in the history books. Whether we tear it down and forget it never had anything, you know, that then you're erasing history and then we're doomed to repeat it. But to my, you know, for a different point is like that flag has meant a lot of things to a lot of different people for a long time. It gave them a source to rally around. It gave them unity. It did give them, Southerners at least, a common cause. So when I was saying, like, when you are tearing this sort of heritage and safety blanket away from people and saying, you know, this is where your pride and joy was, like, what are we replacing it with? What is stepping in to fill that vacuum? Because to be American has clearly been meant very different things for a lot of people. And yeah, toss that one.
Well, look, since you're tossing, I'm going to go right over to James. So, so in this common creed, in this conversation, yeah, did you get it? So, like, I agree with Brett because we were talking about how I've heard this in history and in other civilizations where people come in and it's like, okay, we don't believe in what you believed in, so we're going to destroy all the history that you have here and erase people, which has been done for centuries, generations.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's all, throughout history we see that being done. And I agree with Brett. You're doomed to repeat something that you don't understand and pay attention to how it was created in the first place. So in this place of change that we're looking at, what, and I have the in the blog, change is to make or become different, take or use another instead. And so what Brett is saying, what is the instead of? And not to take that heritage and that history that people grew up with away from them without saying, okay, how do we have this common understanding, this common bridge on how do we get to the same path? So James, what do you think? What's your thought on?
Well, I guess I should have one more addendum in what we were talking about. Like, we will never create that common cause without the uncomfortable conversations.
Yes.
And I've spoken to people close to me recently who are like, yo, I'm done talking about it. People just been angry and I'm fatigued and I don't want to get there. And I was like, but then you don't ever make any progress forward if you're not willing to be uncomfortable. So, and I guess the fall one thought is like, when we're white, we can step out of the conversation. It's pretty easy. We're just like, nope, I'm done. Bye, guys. I'm not gonna be with it today. No thanks. Like, y'all figure it out. I don't want to deal with that emotion. But you know, and that's just something that we have to think about when it comes to that concept of white privilege, because for people of color, like, that is a history and a history of trauma, of generational trauma that you can't ever just check out from.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about that, to respond to what you said there, is I've had the conversations also where people are like, I'm tired of having the conversations about this. I'm tired of talking about that, because part of survival, I think in the African-American community has been a certain portion, has been, I can't look at that every day. I have to walk and figure out how to walk this out without seeing that and speaking of that every day. So it's not a thing where every day you thought of it. It's become ingrained, which is sad, but it's become ingrained in the part of life and walking out. It's your everyday reality. So it's like, well, I'm not going to look at the hard stuff that could cause more pain and more trauma because I'm stuck with what I already have. I don't have space for any more. So, James, I don't know if I didn't want to take your point, but I jumped in there. I'm sorry. So what do you think about the change in the instead of? How do, I guess that's a deep question. I don't know if that's an answer. That's a fair question to ask, but it's your birthday. Figure
Well,
I'll throw it to you.
geez, what a great present. Thank you. So, so here's my thoughts on it. I'm going to try to encapsulate it all in a really brief response. So, first and foremost, I think the first word that came to my mind as you all have been talking, if I were young, which I'm not, right? But I would say the world is now woke, right? The world is now aware of the possibility that a pandemic can start on the other side of the world and can impact you personally. And you have to take that into consideration. The world is aware that that racial injustice can impact you, and it can impact you in a different way. And now they are aware that this has not just been a hidden sin of the United States, but it has been something that's been going on around the world for a long time. And it is a challenge for all. Regarding the replacement of history, I don't think you replace history. I don't think that, and this is probably not a very popular opinion at the moment, which, okay. Tearing down monuments is not nearly as important as tearing down bad ideals and poor beliefs and institutionalized habits that have been happening for a very long time, and that many people were not only unaware of, but just simply accepting of. So I think the challenge that we face is something that we talked about a while ago just for COVID, but settling in that new normal. Because one of the things that change by its nature is disruptive. It makes you uncomfortable. It makes you uneasy. It makes you feel like you're standing on shifting sand. And it creates in us it tears down our false sense of what was solid and what was real. And that's what we've been experiencing these last, 6 months now, about what we thought was real. We thought it was real that we'd always be able just to drive to a supermarket and get toilet paper and food. We thought it was real that, many Americans thought it was real that I can just, go to the police and I'll be safe. Or if the police come into my situation, I'm going to be okay. Many of these things have been revealed that while yes, 90, I can't give a percentage, but most of the time those things are true. But what happens in the exceptions? What happens in those tough times? Do we come together, or do we go to our separate ideals and beliefs and corners and then argue it out and point fingers at each other? What makes the idea of America so great is that a group of people without a common beginning can come together and make something special. And that's being challenged right now as we go through all these changes. What will America become after COVID? What will America become after the racial incidents and situations that have been occurring have been exposed and revealed? In our community, these are nothing new. This isn't anything that was really a surprise to us. It hurts to see it, but it's never been a surprise. We've known about this for generations. As we talked about in previous episodes of this, as a father of a Black son, it is my responsibility to teach him how to survive a police encounter. That's one of the rules. That's one of the things we teach each other. And I'm the son of a retired police detective. And these are just things that we inherently did as part of our normal. And now that those things are being exposed, now when those things come to light, now we can look at how are we going to change? How are we, because we have the choice of just allowing things to continue as a status quo, or stepping in and demanding that there's going to be change. I think, and I'll finish with this. In recent times, we have looked to our government and our leadership to create the change, and then we will follow along. And if you look back over our history, that's never been the case. We've always, as a people, rose up and demanded a change. And it's not that it was always the majority. The civil rights movement wasn't all of America. The Revolutionary War, popular, as popular as it is now, 200 and something years later, was really, a lot of people didn't participate. A lot of people didn't participate in the Civil War. They just wanted to get by. But it was those people that said, no, we're going to stand for change and we're going to see it through, that made the difference. So I don't know if I really answered your question, but those were the things that were on my mind as I was listening to everybody go through with their thoughts and their answers.
And that was his short version, I want to point out.
Don't give a pastor a mic.
I mean, this is actually going to be short, but it's just one, when you talk about, and I was just on a call about resisting oppression yesterday, and it was talking about the iceberg of oppression and the tip of what you see, that's the statues. Or if you're in the Middle East, it's like when we went in there to liberate everyone, right? And we're like, take off the burqas. And they're like, yo, this is just what you see. And what you see is the very top of it. And then underneath it gets to systemics, or the systems that are holding this cruelty in place. And then at the very bottom is the culture.
Yes. The 3 layers of racism. Yes. The individual, the system, and then the culture. That's spot on, Brett. That's a great point to bring out.
Wow. Well, I have a very heavy question to ask, and since this conversation is so heavy, can you all hear my guinea pig chirping? Is she distracting anyone besides me? Okay, that was my heavy question. Man, she is going to town. I guess she wants to be part of this conversation. All right, sorry, Regyna. I know we're supposed to be grown-ups here.
Hey, well, I've seen your guinea pig, and I think she's precious. So. Now, well, I'm going to throw this one to you, Jory.
Okay.
So, I understand being, and look, we talk about rose-colored glasses and saying the world
Mm-hmm.
and the beautiful place that it is, and we just need to find that place. But finding empathy, because I think in the article I had said about going from right to left to right, we're doing these pendulum swings so far, and recognizing that we aren't where we were 200 years ago, but we're definitely not where we need to be.
Mm-hmm.
But in that time, people's lives has changed, people's situations have changed, and there are people, African Americans, who have achieved far beyond. And if you ask them how is the person's life that lives in an inner city, and they live in Beverly Hills or wherever they may be, and they're fortunate enough to be there, the racial disparity, they still, like LeBron James still came home and had things written on his house. He still had to deal with that. But the economics of how people have to live every day, I think recognizing that there's more common in different people, it's not just the skin color. There are more common things that we need to understand about each other and hear each other there also. I think it's too easy to miss that there is more common. There's more things to do besides just the racial injustice.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's the correct way to ask the question, but I'm tossing it. That's what was
You're hoping I find a nugget in there?
In there
somewhere. Well, last week we did talk about economic injustice, and there are a lot of people who would say, let's take color out of it and look at the economic injustice. That's really the key thing, and I, of course, a lot of people would disagree and then say, well, it's the race issue first, then the economic. So is it economic, then race, or is it race and then economic, but they blend together. But I mean, you're right. Gosh, I mean, it's not like all white people are middle class and up, or all Black people with a capital B, I've learned, are, oh, so is it supposed to be a capital W now, or is it just a capital B and a small, oh, Brett's shaking her head. I mean, I really don't know. I know it's supposed to be a capital B now, at least in journalism.
Okay.
But anyway, is it, you know, what, I mean, you find Caucasian with a capital C who are not economically well off, and you find African Americans, the capital AA, who are very well off. So, I mean, you can't say in, you know, blanket statement, this is how it is. But but what I think people are looking at is most of the numbers, not the outliers. Right?
I think that gets back to a definition of racism by Ijema Oluo, and it's not just saying racism is making a judgment on someone by the color of their skin, which it is, but the point that we're talking about, perhaps as a capital R, is that it's thereafter reinforced by systems of power. And that's, I think, what we're talking about. And you can always make exceptions to every rule. Like, why would you say that, you know, this race doesn't do well, look at this person? But it's like you said, it's talking about what generally happens.
Right.
But Regyna, forgive me if I'm wrong. I think you were kind of getting at, how do we find the common ground, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Mother, would you like to discuss how one finds common ground with people?
Well,
I'm going to toss this to you, Mom.
okay.
How did you find anything in common when you were sitting on the floor of a random person's home in Oman and you got kicked in the face?
Oh, you want to explain that one a little better, Brett? You go ahead.
I'll leave that to you. I'll leave that to you.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, kids will be kids. So what can I say? What Brett is referring to is when her sister Jan and I went over to Bahrain. All three of us then went to Oman to visit Brett's good friends that she'd had for years. And one of Brett's good friends had a daughter who was 4 or so. She was just going off to school, right? This is her first day of school. And she came back and we were in the home, and it was such a beautiful home. And oh my gosh, the hospitality was absolutely incredible. We felt like queens. And then the little girl came in and basically attacked me. That's what Brett's referring to. She ran over and kicked me in the face because I was down on the floor with her. So yeah, that was,
point being, to connect it to Regyna's statement,
yeah,
is that to look at a white woman of a certain class, of a certain background, it wouldn't seem like you had anything in common with Zainab's mother. But all of a sudden, you guys are about besties when we left. And how do we do these things?
Love. I mean, you know, she probably appreciated the fact that I wasn't super mad at her daughter, that I just kind of brushed it off. And she was probably a little bit embarrassed, but we all love you, Brett. But oh my gosh, the love and hospitality that was extended was amazing. I mean, it wasn't hard at all to find common ground.
And so you found common ground through the love that you shared and through these positive things. And then all of a sudden, it wasn't you dressed in pink and she dressed this way. Yeah. It wasn't you had this money, she had this money. And it wasn't even that you were allowed to go outside wearing a short skirt, and she would probably keel over dead before that happened.
Before what happened? Before what happened?
Wearing a short skirt outside or something.
Oh, right.
But I think what Regyna's getting at, and you not completely different, but like, you're a Christian, she's Muslim. Like, where do we find this common ground? And it's that actually coming together and spending time together, and maybe not being in our own little bubble so much, and not being so focused on our differences, but really just being like, hey, look, we're humans.
Right.
You love your kids. I love my kids.
And Brett's friend spoke English, some English, right? I mean, Brett had to do a lot of translation, but she did speak some English. But her mother, so the grandmother of this little girl, didn't speak any English at all. And she and I mean, I'm older than she is, but she and I connected so well, and it was just so sweet how she even went out and got on her super, remember she said, oh, we have a surprise for you, and she went out and she got on this beautiful, I want to say dress, but that's not the right word, but a beautiful gown. What's the right word, Brett? I don't know, because she was in a different
I would
tribe.
just say it's the Belushi natural dress.
Okay, it was amazing. But yeah, you're right. I mean, we really bonded, even though we didn't have culture in common. We had love in common. That's a good point.
Yeah.
What I wanted to bring into the conversation, speaking of common ground, is it's not just, when we say people of color, it's not just blacks, right? It's not just African Americans. When I first started my career, I did a lot of advocacy for Hispanics. I'd lived in Spain and I traveled in Spanish speaking countries, and my Spanish was good. And I really wanted to help Hispanics assume a different place in the United States. You know, this is back in the time of Cesar Chavez. I guess he would have said Cesar Chavez. And so I was very involved in that in the DC area. And so, you know, as all of this is going on, I'm thinking, okay, well, what about the Hispanics? What about the Native Americans? What about the Muslim Americans? You know, what about the Asian? I mean, there's so many people involved that this, and you know, I'm going to go there. That's why at first I was kind of put off by Black Lives Matter and more in line with All Lives Matter, because it really is all races, or I don't know, help me out here, guys.
Yeah. Well, someone said something about the Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter. I heard this on, either I read it or I heard it on a TV show. And it was a singer who was saying, when she says Black Lives Matter, she said it's like being in a community where houses are all around. But there's a black house, where the black family lives, the house is on fire. And the fire truck comes. Now the Hispanic house is next to it on one side, we'll say the Native Americans on the other side. And when the truck comes in, everyone else is standing around going, but put water on our house because all of our houses matter. But right now, what house is on fire the most, and which ones can be impacted the most by putting that fire out?
Okay.
I think I had never heard, I was like, that was a good way to explain
That's
it.
good.
Yeah. So, but we were talking, and it was interesting because as Brett was speaking and Joy, as you were talking, I was thinking about, we have a culture built on labels. And I think that's one of the biggest things, because when I think about music and how the music genre used to be, you had to be country, or you had to be pop, or you had to be art, and everything was stuck into a category. And if you cross that, it was amazing that you cross the lines. But music is music. And if you listen to country music, if you listen to some rap, now they're stories. So even though the underlying bass or the musical baseline might be different, they're about telling the hearts and the stories of people. And I think as we're looking at moving forward, we have to recognize that we're different and respect, and not say you have to lose who you are, but not say, well, because you are this, you have to be in this pocket. I think a lot of times, to get an understanding, because of the way we've been raised and groomed, is you have to put it in a pocket, at something, you have to go into this bucket for me to understand who you are. But then as people, everyone is different in those buckets. So it's difficult. And we're seeing now how much so many things are overlapping. And I think when we get like Brett, when you were saying the woman in Amman, she was a mother. You know, at the end of the day, she felt her. She didn't look at Jory, and she may have looked at Jory and said, "Okay, well, this is a woman from America." But this woman from America is reaching out, and we have a common relationship, even without the language.
Oh, she loved me instantly, and Jana, just because we were Brett's family. You know, I mean, they adore Brett, and family is so important. You know, by extension, you love the family as well. And there were other families in Oman, same thing. It's just amazing. Yeah. So it's all Brett. Brett's the common ground. Brett!
I would suggest that the only way that I ever make any ground anywhere, and my God, the number of times I've had to completely move to a whole new city. And you know, the Americans love their tribes. And even before it got to race, like I've said more than once, and I wasn't actually kidding, that like you know, Americans just live by no new friends. You know, you grow up, you got your people, and that's your people. And for me, having moved around so much, it can be very difficult to meet new friends. And how I do it is kind of the same every time. Whether now it's like, oh, I have a puppy, you have a puppy. Maybe you're not so scary, because I joke, I'm not. I'll wear my aviators outside, and I totally have like, don't mess with me, right? Like, I don't want you to deal with me. Like, you need to back off. And then, you know, Bonnie runs up and it's like, oh, it's a teddy bear. And it's like, oh, I guess there's that smile. But it is, look, you know, beyond the giant fences that say keep out. You're like, well, what can branch it? And sometimes it's making people laugh. Sometimes it's shared music. Again, when I was in Azerbaijan, the woman was a mother and she was proud of it. And I think just having that open mind and that listening heart, I think the reason I can chameleon, like, jump around different cultures, is I just kind of sit there and I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Teach me more. And I ask a lot of questions. And I think that questioning, curious attitude, which can almost be the innocence of a child, but that curious mind and that willingness to listen, that's what gets me places.
So I think this is great. I love the way the conversation is going. For me as a Christian pastor, love is the unifying force. Love is the thing that brings together. Love is the absolute thing that saves us. For us in the Christian community, we affirm that God is love. So when you ground yourself in love, you're grounding yourself with God. Even if you are not within a faith community, if you're talking about love, you're still talking about God in ways that you don't fully embrace in an outward kind of way, but you are still talking about God. These are the things of God when we talk about love. And no matter what divides us, love is the thing that will bring us together. And finding the way to talk about that so that we see the love behind what we're talking about, that's key. That's key to finding the common ground. The analogy that Regyna shared about that the house is on fire, that's key. And I've heard that analogy, and I've seen other explanations of Black Lives Matter. When the white community first heard Black Lives Matter, yes, a wall goes up. Why? Because all lives matter is that creed that we've been taught in Sunday school, that we know, that we understand. And why are we now changing that creed? Well, we're changing that creed because we're loving those who are the most vulnerable. And when we can begin to hear that and to hear the love behind the statement, then Black Lives Matter and all lives matter can coexist side by side. And we can even allow Black Lives Matter as a creed to rise to the top and all lives matter sinks to the bottom for a time. I saw an image of a little girl, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years old, and she was holding this beautiful sign. I shared it in worship, but it said, when we say Black Lives Matter, of course, all lives matter. We're just saying Black Lives Matter because it's the Black lives that are vulnerable and the Black lives that are being attacked right now. That made perfect sense. And that wall comes down when we see the love behind the sentiment. So are some people wielding Black Lives Matter as a weapon? Maybe. But I think the vast majority are holding that out there as this is the model of love, to love those who are most vulnerable. And some people are wielding all lives matter as a weapon. So when you wield these slogans as weapons, that's going to continue to divide us. When you can explain what you mean behind what you're saying and see that love is the point behind what you're saying, then we come together. There are plenty of people, good intentioned people, who are saying all lives matter, and they mean that genuinely to include Black lives, so that there is a loving sentiment behind that. So when we put down the weapons, we come together in love.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, because it's like when we get beyond the 30-second news clip and we hear the full story, that's when we hear the love behind the conversation.
Exactly.
You know, I think we talk about in the Bible, the stories and the accounts of those people who lived before. And we have to remember that we are all part of the story. We are all different books of the Bible. And unless we share our story and we share our journeys with each other in love and here in love, we'll never understand or see the fullness of the beauty of what God has created, putting us all together at this time. It's like we are alive here now in this season for this appointed time. We could have been born 100 years ago or 100 years from now, but we're here because we make a difference. God has each one of us here because we make a difference in those people that we are encountering. And I think us having these conversations and being able to be open and genuine in them is a blessing. And I said it over and over again when we first started talking about this. I am so thankful that we can have these honest conversations and that we can throw up all kinds of crazy things and see what happens. Okay, what's the conversation? Where does it go?
Yeah.
Because in that, we find truth. We find the common ground that we all are looking for the love. We're all looking for information, for knowledge, so that we can be better corporately as a people. I mean, as all of us, so that we can all lives and all people make a difference and we matter when we all look at each other with respect and say, hey, we're in this together because I need you to make the difference.
Amen.
So
I want to bring up something. When I was looking at on the news about CHOP in Seattle, would you believe that maybe y'all saw it, that on one of the walls, the newly constructed walls, it said love wins. And I thought, oh, how nice to see that in the midst of everything else, right? So somebody is reaching out. And then I wanted to throw out something because I love you guys and I want to talk about it. And I need your help on this. Let me get back. Okay. So I was telling Dave, my husband, that I noticed something weird this week when I don't go out much. And I don't get out much. And I was, probably we just went to the, a smaller grocery store or something like that. And I said, gosh, Dave, I feel so weird. I said, I don't know that this is bad, but I don't think it's good. But now I'm noticing Black people that I didn't notice before. And I don't mean in the sense of I ignored them, but what I don't like is now I'm looking at somebody and thinking they're Black. I wonder what they think about everything that's going on, And one of the things I've loved about my friendship with the Coopers and, so many of my friends is that them with me and me with them, we go beyond color, right? I mean, obviously we're aware that our skin tone is different, right? Obviously. But it bothered me that here I was at ShopRite or wherever, and I'm looking at people I don't know and I'm thinking they're Black. I wonder what they think is going on. So help me process that.
There's a term called Sonder. I think it's German, and it means to look at someone and suddenly realize their life is as complex as your own. I'll let the Coopers have a final say in this, but my kind of thoughts are just you're looking at these people and you're realizing their stories are as complex as your own, and maybe their take on the news is a little bit different. And it's not in a negative way. It's just looking at a person, you're saying, wow, you're a person, and you might be more impacted by the news today because of your experiences that I might not have shared.
I think that's well said, Brad. I think that I alluded to it earlier about being woke, right? That simply means I'm now aware that things are different than how I perceived them previously. And that's the
friendly definition of woke. I can accept that definition.
Okay, well that's my definition. That's the pastor definition. And now I need to see my life differently. For many of us as men, a couple of years ago, that was Me Too, right? Mm-hmm. It was a difference. We knew that it was a problem, but we didn't understand the depth of the situation and the problem for women in corporate America or the military, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. and just everyday life. And in your particular case, what you just outlined, many are becoming aware of some of the things that we have said for years or experienced, and now it becomes a thing, which is what I was talking about. Because once your mind is aware of something, it can't go back to its original size, shape, or form, or fashion. So now these are things that have to be considered. When God sheds a light on something, when he illuminates it, and we become aware of it, we now must go to him and go, so what do I do about this? Well, you've given me this now, or I'm aware of this now. What do I do with this? How do I handle this? What should I do differently with my life? Because now I'm aware of it. And I can't go back to the way it was. I won't go back to the way it was. So that's part of what your enlightenment or what you've been experiencing.
Well,
And
I
what we
guess,
counsel.
James, but I didn't like the idea that I was looking at somebody and going, they're Black.
Yeah.
I've never done that before.
Yeah. I guess it's one of the things, is it, when you were in your community and you're in a neighborhood, and you go to a store and you saw people, it was a shared experience. And you didn't have to think, well, are you seeing the same experience different than I am?
Yeah.
And now it's like, wow, how can it be so different? And if it is, can you, I really want to know. It's like, I want to know, is it different? And because you're a conversationalist, So for you, it's like, I want to have that conversation.
Yes, I love talking.
Right.
Yes, you're exactly right. Well,
Yeah.
I tell you what's been good for me has been whenever I've been in a situation where I'm the minority. Usually it's been in a church situation, or I'm in this wonderful group called Achi, and I'm definitely in the minority. It's mostly African American Christian women, and it's a good feeling. It's like, I get it. And so I'm more aware now when I'm in a, I don't know, it could be a classroom, it could be anything, or actually now a Zoom room, and there's one African American or one Asian or one Hispanic. It's an interesting feeling here in mostly white America.
I feel are we these days? Are we though?
Yeah, I don't know. Depends on your community, right? I would say
Right.
Hartford County.
But I also think, and because I've been trying to do some research on this topic, and it was saying that a lot of white children are from a young age taught that race doesn't matter. Race doesn't matter. Don't worry about it. Like, we all see them as people. Don't talk about it. But in so doing, we do kind of ignore everyone else's other experiences, and we kind of downplay and we minimalize it. And, if the concept of white privilege is life isn't harder for me just because of my skin tone, then we just don't, we don't take into account other things. And so it's probably just how you were raised, Joelle and Hinkson telling young Jory, don't talk about their race. Don't look at that. Just people are people. And it's all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is a factor in people's lives and experiences. I have never experienced it, but I've heard that frequently people of color get followed around a grocery store. So,
Yes.
So it's like, are you looking
That's
at them and you're
creepy.
like, wow, are you about to steal something?
That is creepy.
Yeah. And you know what's weird? What's funny about that? It's like going to the store, and it was like, I think growing up, it's like when you went to a grocery store, you didn't taste the grape to see if it was sweet before you bought the whole bushel.
Right.
That's something you were not, don't touch that, don't pick that up, because someone might think you're stealing it. And even if you taste the grape, you're in trouble because you didn't pay for it and you were just eating it because you were trying to take it.
Yeah.
So it's like those little things. As I got older and, we moved into different neighborhoods, and it was like, okay. But yeah, being followed in stores was like yeah.
Well, I had an aha last week reading an article. I don't want to say the names of the drugstores in case I get them wrong, but there were 2 drugstores that say that now they're going to unlock the products that are used for African Americans, women in their hair. That apparently they've been locked up before, so you'd have to go get an attendant to help you get it. It was like, oh my gosh. How on earth did they get away with that for all this time? Jeez. All right. Oh, James is trying to get in a word. Oh, I know. I've been ignoring him. Go ahead, James. Are we? Ah. Let's see if we have any comments from Facebook. Go ahead, James. I'll shut up.
I'm not sure. All right, so so here was my comment, was that simply that to your point, this was well over 20 years ago when we were living in Charlotte. I was working with a good friend, Mary Elizabeth, and we were in a store, and we had been working all afternoon on some projects, and we walked in the store and we were hungry, and we went by the section where you can get power bars and protein bars, and she grabs one, and I grab one also, and she opens hers and starts eating it. And she goes, "Go ahead, you're hungry, eat." I said, "No." And she goes, "Why not?" I said, "Because I'm black." And she said, "Well, what's that mean?" And she had no understanding, and it wasn't bad, but I simply said, "Because chances are I'll get arrested." And she said, "That's not true." And I said, "Yes, it is true." And so I went to the register, made sure I paid for it, and then walked out and ate my bar with my receipt. And later on, we met with another friend of hers, a black woman, and she said, "Yeah, James was telling me," Mary Elizabeth was explaining, "James was telling me about how you can't go in the supermarket and pick grapes or pick up a candy bar or a power bar and eat it in the store." And she goes, "Oh no, you better not. You can't do that." So the point I was trying to get to is that this is what we talk about with systemic issues of racism, right?
Yeah.
That the law is written, but it's not the same. And for many of us, that's the challenge that we face, whether it's based on the color of your skin or where you live or that situation. So the challenge for us is what we want, right? What all people want is an equal or level playing field, that the rules apply to everybody the same way. And until that happens, then yes, Black Lives Matter, Brown Lives Matter, whatever type of lives matter. That's the goal. That's what we're all shooting for. And until we can get there, until we are trained to see each other differently, rather not differently, but see each other as the same, because we're trained to see each other differently, whether it's implied or it's actually part of the curriculum, that's the challenge.
Yeah. The interesting thing when James, you were saying that, I worked at a bank. That was my previous life. I worked the banking cycle, so no one can say which bank it is because I worked for like 5 different companies, different banks. But I remember at one of the banks, they were excited about the Hispanic loan. And I was like, "Well, what's that?" And in presenting it, it was like, "Well, we're going into Hispanic communities." But it wasn't just that. It was just the rate. It was some of the things that they were doing with this loan. And I remember hearing them say that, and I was like, "Okay, you're saying that in front of me now. I'm hearing it in passing." And I was like, "Okay, at some point that was a black loan. And that those rates are different. The prices were going to be a little bit higher because the inherent, the systematic piece was, we're probably going to have more risk on this loan."
Yeah.
Whether true or not, but that's where if you went to a branch, you were going to get put into the Hispanic loan if you were Hispanic.
Oh man. So it wasn't a good thing.
It wasn't, but the people that were presenting it, it was like, well, we're giving opportunity. But if the opportunity wasn't at the same factor and the same rate, you're giving me money, but you're making me pay more for it. So it was an interesting thing to discover. And then you're at work. What do you say? I'm sitting there like, am I going to rise up and say that's not fair?
Yeah.
The loan was going to be there anyway.
Yeah.
So how do you learning to move forward? I think now we're at a time that people can say, this is what we're saying, and that doesn't make sense. Just like they're allowing police officers now.
Right.
If you see someone doing something wrong, you can step in without feeling like you're going to be penalized because you stepped up.
Yeah.
So.
Well, the question is, did they have any stats to back it up? I mean, think about how insurance for somebody who's 20, car insurance is going to be more than somebody who's proven to be a very safe driver, and probably they did not have this.
Oh, chicken versus egg, because do you default on a loan because the rates are higher to begin with?
Yeah, I mean, well, that's what I'm saying. They probably didn't have the stats to back it up. I mean, unfortunately, with the youth, you know, and the car insurance, they probably did have stats that more accidents were caused by young people. But anyway, we are over time. We've been just talking and talking. Regyna, you want to wrap it up? And yeah.
Yeah, so with all that we're saying, you know, like again, I'm thankful that we can have the conversation. And at the end of the article, I'd say when we operate with the wisdom of God, loving our neighbors as we love ourselves, we are all lifted higher. And I think as long as we keep doing that, keep looking for ways to hear each other and to have the conversations and be open and coming from an honest intention of love and moving forward, we'll all be lifted higher. So I hope in these conversations we've been having over the past weeks, and that people are listening and can share and have those conversations with other people they may encounter. So let us be the spark to continue the flame.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Regyna. And that spark can light how many birthday candles, James?
Woohoo!
21? Oh, one. One candle. Oh, we're at this point where you have to have one
big candle.
One big candle, 55 inches long.
Well, happy birthday, James. What are you going to do this year to make it a special year?
I'm going to eat.
You're going to eat cake? Oh, you said? Okay. All right. So I just want to let everybody know we're going to switch from doing weekly calls now that, at least for now, neighborhoods and communities are starting to open up and people are getting busier outside, and people might even start being able to go back to church for all my pastors here. We're going to switch from weekly to monthly. So we're going to be doing this on the second Wednesday, most of the time at 2:00 Eastern. So with that, Regyna, do you want to pray for us? The world, pray for the world.
Yes. So Lord, I thank you for this time. I thank you for every heart here and everyone who's listening, whether live or in replay. Lord God, let it spread. Let us, our message, let our hope, let the love that we show to one another spread like wildfires across the world and around the globe. Lord God, continue to protect each and every one of us and all those listening for health and wisdom, and to keep that kindness and hope in our eyes on God in all that we do. In Jesus' name, amen.
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 Thank you so much. Any last words, Brett? Okay. Thank you for your contribution, Brett. You're awesome. Any last words, Byron? No, you're good. You're going to go renew some vows for a couple at church. That's awesome. Yay. James, any last words?
Great job, Regyna. Really love you.
Yeah. Aw, that's beautiful. Thank you, Regyna. So you look for the light now here.
Always.
I finally got it right. All right. Love you guys. Love you.
All right. Take care.
Goodbye, world. See you in July. Bye-bye.